Morning, y'all. Hope you had a nice weekend. Hope you had a good Halloween. I certainly did. I had a bunch of kids come by and we set out candy for them and they took it all, so that's cool. So I guess we'll just start with where we left off then. We left off last week with the work day because I was feeling generous, so I gave you guys a day to work. I'm gonna grade everyone's papers today, by the way. Sorry, I've been so slow on that. But what was I gonna say? So yeah, we finished up Mesopotamia in ancient Mesopotamia, which is in modern day Iraq. They relied on the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers to survive. Those rivers are kind of not really, they don't exist in the same way they used to. They're now way smaller because of people drawing on them for water. People have like the engineers over time have changed the flow of the water by building dams and things like that. So ancient Mesopotamia, the Tigris and the Euphrates are not flowing through there anymore. So that's the old river civilizations aren't even by the rivers anymore because it's been 5,000 years and the rivers have changed. So ancient Mesopotamia is in a river valley, but no longer. Now it's in the middle of the desert because things have changed. So that's the first river civilization we study. I'm going to do a little bit differently today. I'm going to try to, I've been kind of just dumping assignments on you guys and not really giving you much context to them, which kind of sucks. It's one of the things that we lose when we don't have class time. So I'm going to do it a little bit differently today and kind of just try to put all of this whole lesson, kind of wrap it up with a nice bow, I guess, and present it to you guys. So we started with the first river civilization, which is Mesopotamia, because it's the first one that was created, we think. We found the oldest cities in the world have been in Mesopotamia, or close to it. One of them is Catalhayuk, which is in modern day Turkey, a place called Anatolia in the ancient days. And that they think is the oldest city ever made. But there's people who argue about that. Historians argue endlessly about it because why not? So we start off with Mesopotamia, which is in Iraq. It's the first civilization, we think. So then that's where I start with, because that seems to make sense. You start at the beginning. But the next three civilizations, it's up to me to pick because they kind of all came about at the same time, sort of, which is interesting because a lot of people argue that it's not three civilizations. It was all one group that developed together. And that's why we see technology springing up in Egypt and in China at relatively the same time, even though they're super far apart, because they were interconnected. We're starting to believe. Modern history is pointing towards that these civilizations were more connected than we ever thought they were. They traded with each other, they traded ideas, goods, that kind of stuff. So they're more intermingled than we originally thought. We're starting to realize. So we're going to move on next to ancient Egypt because I think that one's just the coolest civilization of all. I think the Great Pyramids are super awesome and amazing. And the fact that Egypt was able to maintain a single political unit over a couple of thousands of years is probably the coolest feat anyone's ever achieved. They had the longest standing government ever, so pretty neat stuff. Very stable place. Egypt was a great place to be alive in the ancient days. It's probably the best place you could hope to be, because of the Nile, and the Nile's awesome, and we're going to learn all about that. And then after we learn about Egypt, we're going to go to China because China is my second favorite one. I think China's super cool. I love the idea that China is so different than the culture that we grew up in, so I'm fascinated by it. We're going to learn all about the Chinese and how they utilized the Yellow River to create their civilization. And then last but not least, we'll study the Indus River Valley, which would be the people in modern day India, Pakistan. They had a very extensive and amazing civilization that kind of just disappeared, and nobody knows why. And we still haven't figured it out. So they're a cool one. They got a lot of mystery there. So if you were ever trying to do research on ancient civilizations, finding out why the Indus people disappeared would make you super, super famous. So we're going to start with these very first civilizations, and then we're going to move on to like empires next, and the cool big empires that existed in the ancient days. And then we're just going to kind of go over the fact that all empires rise and fall, and they usually rise and fall for different reasons. It's never the same story twice. History does not repeat itself. History's never repeated itself. So when people say history repeats itself, they're lying. They're full of it. History does not repeat itself. They just don't understand nuance. Everything is different that's ever happened. No two things have happened exactly the same twice. It's impossible. So that puts us at 6 minutes. So sorry, we're going to run a little bit long on this one. I'm going to try and teach you guys a little bit about Egypt today, and then we'll pick up on the next one. But I just wanted to give you some context on what's going on and why I'm even teaching you this class this way. So I'm trying to do it kind of chronologically, which means you start from the beginning and then you move to the end. A movie moves in chronological order, usually, unless the movie starts 2 years in the future and then it goes back. That's not chronological. It has to go start to finish. So that's what we're doing. We're going to start with human history, which we already did. The very first people. This is world history, so you could argue we could learn about stuff before humans because it's still history, but I think of history as the study of humans and human history, not other history. So we're just going to focus on humans. So I guess with no further ado, we will start on ancient Egypt, and then we will move forward until we get to the modern times. No, probably not. There's not nearly enough time. We'll probably barely even get to a world you guys recognize, essentially. We'll see how many more sessions we get, because there's so much to learn. We'll never learn it all. Anyways, I keep saying we're going to go back to the lesson, and then I don't do it. So let's just do the old screen share. Stop sharing. All right. Oop. The kingdoms of ancient Egypt. So here's Egypt. Oh, let's get that laser pen out, laser pointer. So this is the Nile River Valley. As you can see, it is quite green, and everywhere around it is extremely desert. So this is where people lived. In Egypt, 80% of the people live in 20% of the space. Most of Egypt is empty wasteland because it's so desert. So here's the river coming up from Sudan and Ethiopia down here, and then all the way up. This is all Egypt, though. So I'm also going to assign you guys a guided notes that's going to go with this. So you can either have it pulled up and go through it as you do the video, or afterwards. I'll put the slides up too, so you guys can go through the slides on your own. So Egypt's geography. It's centered around the Nile River Valley. As I just showed you, the Nile River floods at the same time every year. This is extremely important information. So the Nile floods at the same time every year, which means it's really easy to predict it. And you can know when you're going to get flooding, and then the floods leave behind silt, and then you can grow crops on the land that was just flooded, because the flooding of the water brings in nutrients to the soil. So the Nile floods at the same time every year, whereas in Mesopotamia, it did not flood at the same time every year. So you have no idea when it's going to flood. So sometimes you could be like, you think it's going to be the dry season and everyone's chilling, and then you get this horrible flood and it ruins like half the city because you weren't ready for it. You didn't have the dikes prepared, all that kind of stuff. So life is much more chill in the Nile because, or shoot, this is on timer. Life is much more chill in Egypt than it is in Mesopotamia because of the predictability of the floods. So the floods are predictable, which was associated with their gods. So their gods were predictable. Their gods were nice, unlike Ethiopian or unlike Mesopotamian gods who were mean. So Egypt's geography, so the cataracts of the Nile, they're like sections of the Nile. You can think of a cataract as a section. They divide the river and then they create rapids. So it's kind of, there's some rapids areas which make it a little bit tough to travel on all the way from bottom to beginning. It's not as nice as like say the Mississippi where you can kind of coast your whole way. The Nile's a little bit more intense. The first cataract marked the southern border of Upper Egypt. So it's weird. We always think of north being up, and then south being down. But here, Lower Egypt is north and Upper Egypt is south because the river flows from south to north because it's in the south. So Upper Egypt is up river, Lower Egypt is down river, but it's north. So it's kind of backwards. So the Nile flows north, thus the Lower Egypt is to the north. And as you can see in the last picture, there's huge deserts in between. Well, this one's not so huge, but big deserts on the sides of Egypt, and that keeps it hard to invade. It's really hard to send an army over a desert because you got to keep them fed and water. Moving water was super hard back in the ancient days. So there's 3 kingdoms that Egypt is defined as. It's not broken up by kings. It's just broken up by changes in their culture, like noticeable changes. So the Old Kingdom was 2,700 years to 200 to 2,200 to 2,200 years. Geez, that was hard for me. So 500 years it existed, almost 5,000 years ago. Well, roughly 5,000 years ago, about. The Middle Kingdom would have been 2050 to 1800 BCE, so about 2,000 years. Well, 4,000 years ago, I guess, actually, is what I meant. I don't even know how to do math. And then the New Kingdom, 1550 to 1100 BCE. After that, they got invaded, and then they were no longer Egyptian kingdoms. They were, Roman or something like that. So we're going to study the Old Kingdom first. The Old Kingdom, also called the Pyramid Age. This is where they were building all those really awesome pyramids that I love so much. I still haven't visited the pyramids. It's something I really want to do. I've just been staying clear of Egypt because there's a lot of political turmoil over there right now. And I don't want to get involved in that. So ruling pharaohs built tombs that would last for eternity. We all know that they won't last for eternity, but they've done pretty good. They're doing pretty good after about 5,000 years, still standing. Built usually started when they took the throne. So if I were to become pharaoh today, I would be like, all right, we're going to build me a huge pyramid. So by the time I'm dead, hopefully it's done. The pyramids at Giza. These are 3 very, very popular pyramids. Really cool, incredible looking things. You can see some people over here for scale, the little horses. That's one little horse lined up to that big old thing. And they're in a cool line. There's a lot of cool like alien conspiracy theories about the pyramids that are mostly BS, but they're still fun to learn about. Development of hieroglyphs. So these are the hieroglyphs. It's an ancient it's an ancient language that they used. It's based on Sumerian script. So they took their language from Mesopotamia and altered it in their own. So earlier when I was talking about how we kind of think of them as separate civilizations, well, nowadays we're starting to realize that they were way more interconnected than we thought. And the Egyptians got their language from the Sumerians. It's got pictures, you can see here, like that looks like an eagle or a hawk. That looks like a snail of some kind. There's a cross right here. Interesting. Much before Jesus, but still crosses. Popular thing in human history. So yeah, that's that language. Very hard to read. And it was a ceremonial language, so only the rich people used it. Poor people wouldn't be able to read it. This is a cool picture on papyrus. It's like papyrus is a weed that you can make paper out of. grows plentifully in the Nile. So the Old Kingdom, this is one of the obelisk, these cool little statues they would make. So the Old Kingdom government had Upper and Lower Egypt, they united for the first time. It used to be city-states, and then it finally became a single kingdom under a pharaoh. And he had strong central authority and absolute power. They would have thought of the pharaoh as like a god. A vizier, which is something you might have heard before, it's where the word advisor comes from, was the chief minister who supervised day-to-day government. So he would kind of be almost like the prime minister, and then the pharaoh would be like the king. So the vizier would kind of control most things, and the king would just kind of sit around and then say yes or no. Decline of the Old Kingdom. So this is the ancient Egyptians who built the pyramids. Why did their Old Kingdom decline? Well, because local nomarchs, which would be like nobles, were fighting a lot, trying to, gain favor of the king and do things like that. A lot of court intrigue type assassinations of important characters and things like that. And also there was massive drought that continued on for a few years, and successive crop failures usually lead to the fall of governments. When no one can eat, they usually blame the government, and then they take it down. The pyramids were also extremely expensive, as you can imagine. Instead of spending all that resources on feeding people or making sure they had decent lives, they instead just made them build huge pyramids, and that bankrupted their government. So eventually they collapsed, and then there was this period of anarchy where it was kind of like no one ruled, the city-states were out for themselves, everyone was doing war with each other. It was looking rough for old Egypt. We'll call it a day right there with the fall of the Lower Kingdom. So the guided notes I'll put up, they won't need to be completed yet. You don't have to do them until we get finished with the slideshow. Oops, there we go. So today you won't be doing anything necessarily unless you want to answer the questions we already covered. But otherwise, just watch this video and then get ready for tomorrow. Sorry it went so long, guys. If you got all the way to the end, thanks for watching. I appreciate you.